We will not be re-entering a coalition agreement with the Liberal Party after this election.
Australian politics has entered a new era tonight, with the National Party ending its coalition with the Liberals.
The Nationals' door remains open and our door remains open.
The aftermath of an election loss is rarely pretty. People who have spent an exhausting campaign and perhaps several preceding years, whether in government or opposition, pretending they can stand each other in the service of a common cause, are suddenly freed to vent resentments, settle scores, and start positioning themselves for the next go-round. The kicking dished out by the electorate often pales in comparison to the punishment the defeated party inflicts upon itself, or the viciousness with which its senior members turn on each other. Even by those standards, however, the internecine carnage among Australian Conservatives, badly beaten earlier this month in an election they kind of expected to win, is remarkable. That they would choose a new leader was inevitable. Peter Dutton, who led them to disaster, would have resigned even if he hadn't lost his seat. That the coalition, which has long been the bastion of Australian conservatism, would sunder completely is rather more of a surprise. Some notes on terminology are necessary at this point. Australia's Conservative Party is confusingly called the Liberal Party. When the party was founded in 1944, the word Liberal meant something different, at least in the head of its first leader, Robert Menzies. Menzies, who had been Prime Minister for a couple of years around the beginning of World War II, would later put in a second 16-year shift in the top job, remembered for being fustily conservative to the point of self-parody. But he insisted early on that he called his party Liberal because, quote, "we were determined to be a progressive party, willing to make experiments, in no sense reactionary, but believing in the individual, his rights and his enterprise, and rejecting the socialist panacea."
Are we for the socialist state, with its subordination of the individual, or are we for the ancient British faith that governments are the servants of the people, a faith which has given fire and quality and direction to the whole of our history for 600 years?
Menzies loved cricket and the Queen, and though born in upcountry Victoria, once declared himself British to the bootstraps. When the Liberals have governed, and since the party was formed they have done most of Australia's governing, they have done so in cahoots with another party. That party, founded in 1920 to advocate for the interests of Australia's rural folk, has traded successively as the Australian Country Party, the National Country Party, and now the National Party. Its earlier names helped set up one of Australia's great parliamentary punchlines. One of the party's MPs, Sir Winton Turnbull, emphasising his agricultural credentials, declaimed, "After all, I am a country member." Labour leader Gough Whitlam retorted, "We remember." The coalition between the modern Liberal Party and National Party has proved an outstandingly effective endeavour. Between the founding of the Liberal Party and the end of its most recent stint in power in 2022, the coalition governed Australia for 51 of those 78 years. And this week it ended. The Nationals leader, David Littleproud, who has served as Minister for Agriculture in previous coalition governments, informed the Liberals' new leader, Susan Ley, that he would not be renewing the arrangement.
She is a leader that needs to rebuild the Liberal Party. They are going on a journey of rediscovery, and this will provide them the opportunity to do that.
It seems a somewhat self-defeating manoeuvre. In coalition, the Nats would have been part of the official opposition with access to the resources that go with that status and a presence in the shadow cabinet. By modern convention, the National Party leader is Deputy Prime Minister when the coalition is in government. 3 country/national leaders have briefly served as Prime Minister in caretaker capacities, most recently John McEwen, who held the fort for 22 days from December 1968 to January 1969, while everyone figured out what to do following the disappearance at sea of Liberal Prime Minister Harold Holt. A more recent and longer-serving Liberal Prime Minister, John Howard, has condemned the Nats' desertion as stupid.
Well, I don't think it will last forever, but it's a stupid move.
One assumes, however, that they have their reasons. There are policy differences. The Nationals want a commitment from the Liberals to end Australia's ban on nuclear energy, which probably isn't actually that terrible an idea and may be something the Liberals are coming round to anyway, and bigger spending on rural Australia, which is what the Nationals are there to pitch for. But the two parties have always had policy differences, which is why they're two parties. So there are two plausible explanations. One is that this is a somewhat confected tantrum thrown in the hope of forcing a better offer from the Liberals. Littleproud may have calculated that after the thumping the coalition sustained at the polls, nobody is going to pay any attention to them for a while anyway, so there is little to be lost by indulging in a spot of theatrical flouncing, and Littleproud has possibly tipped his hand on this front by suggesting that the Nats are open to being enticed back into the alliance. Littleproud has also noted that the parties have split in opposition before, most recently when they separately fought, and both lost, the federal election of 1987. That split was occasioned by a brief delirium in which some of the Nats attempted to float Queensland Premier and absurd crook Joe Bjelke-Petersen as a potential Prime Minister. If Bjelke-Petersen's long rule of Queensland can be summed up for the passing listener by any one incident, enjoy this. When he eventually stood trial for perjury, the jury that acquitted Bjelke-Petersen was, it turned out, chaired by a member not only of the State National Party, but of a circle of loyalists known as the Friends of Joe.
Well, the main thing was, naturally, I did not know, as you can understand, what went on.
Which may be a portent of another possible motive for the Nats' decampment, i.e. a belief held by Littleproud that if Susan Lay's Liberals tack more moderate, there may be mileage in going full swivel-eyed culture war headbanger, an Australian analogue of MAGA to the Liberals' American Republicans, Reform to the Liberals' British Tories, at least for a year or two in order to rack up some headlines and airtime. Which raises the possibilities that the Liberals may end up either consumed by the Nationals or glad to be shot of them. For Monocle Radio, I'm Andrew Miller.